Do we persist despite setbacks? Or is there a point when stepping back is wiser? It depends. If you've tried multiple approaches with no progress, stepping back to reassess might be smart. But if the goal still holds value and new approaches exist, persistence could pay off. It's about balancing effort with practicality, knowing when to push and when to pivot. Learned helplessness is a psychology term that means repeated failures lead people to stop trying, even when success is still possible. In this story, this balance is key, as Sarrah's persistence proves that sometimes one more try makes all the difference. In a quiet, close-knit neighborhood, there stood a once vibrant community garden. It had been the heart of the area, a place where neighbors gathered, children played, and flowers bloomed year-round. Sarrah, a young girl at the time, had spent countless afternoons running through the garden trails, her laughter mingling with the buzz of bees and the fragrance of flowers. But years passed, and Sarrah left the neighborhood to pursue her studies abroad, earning a degree in psychology. When she finally returned, eager to reconnect with the place that had shaped her, she was heartbroken by what she found. The beautiful garden of her childhood now lay barren and lifeless, a tangle of weeds and cracked earth. The once thriving space had become a forgotten wasteland. Sarrah couldn't believe her eyes. She went to the neighbors she'd known all her life and asked what had happened. They told her about the drought that had struck the area shortly after she left. The heat had dried up the soil, withering every plant until the garden had been reduced to dust. Did anyone try to bring it back? Sarrah asked, her heart heavy with the sight of what was lost. Oh, we did, a neighbor replied. At first, people tended the garden with great fervor, but when they saw next to no results, they started to move away. Sarrah listened carefully as they continued. Some of the younger ones pursued it for longer, one added. But they gave up too, probably because they weren't consistent and the regeneration wasn't well planned. People did their part when they had time, but you see, everyone has other life's commitments to deal with. As Sarrah walked back home, she realized what had happened. Her neighbors had given up, not because the garden couldn't be revived, but because they had tried sporadically, failed, and then stopped trying altogether. They had fallen into what she knew from her work was learned helplessness, the belief that after repeated failures, nothing would ever change, even when there's still potential for success. Sarrah couldn't shake the feeling that something could be done. Just like the people she helped as a psychologist, the garden needed a second chance. She knew the only way forward was to challenge the belief that it was beyond saving. The next morning, Sarrah loaded a shovel, some seeds and saplings, and a water sprinkler into her car trunk and drove to the garden, determined to restore it. As she knelt in the dry earth and began to clear the weeds, a few neighbors saw her and rushed to the park. "What are you doing?" one called out. "There's no point. That soil's useless." "You're wasting your time," another warned, shaking his head. "We've tried it all." Sarrah smiled and kept working undeterred. "Sometimes things need more than just one try," she replied gently, continuing to dig into the earth. "I'm willing to see what happens if I give it some care." Days passed, and while there were no immediate signs of life, Sarrah remained dedicated. Each day, she returned to water the soil, clearing out more debris and nurturing the land with hope. Some neighbors, inspired by her efforts, joined in to help. Even though they had once given up, seeing Sarrah work tirelessly renewed their belief that maybe, just maybe, the garden could bloom again. Sarrah's efforts paid off when, one morning, she spotted something remarkable. Sprouts had begun to push through the earth. In another corner, the saplings had also taken root and seemed bright. A delicate sign of life was gradually returning to the garden. Over the following days, more plants began to emerge, slowly covering the once barren ground with vibrant green. Soon, the garden was growing steadily, with visible signs of its original beauty returning. The neighbors, even the skeptical elders, slowly started to gather around the garden, watching in awe. One elder, who had once told Sarrah not to bother, approached her. "I can't believe it," he said, shaking his head. "After all this time, it's growing again." Sarrah smiled. Sometimes it's not that things can't change, she said. It's just that we stop believing they can. Within 3 months, the park was returning to its glory, with flowers blossoming, children playing, and neighbors mingling. The once barren land was now a lively gathering spot once again. Please like, subscribe, and comment.